Hey guys, another episode has been cleared for public release, just barely. And by cleared, I mean someone looked at it, frowned and asked if legal had seen it, and then walked away muttering something about tone. And then I got one of those phone calls. You're not actually telling people it's okay to be wrong, are you? No, relax. We're not endorsing wrong. Wrong is still wrong. Wrong gets you findings. Wrong still gets corrective action plans. Wrong still gets meetings with titles like Process Alignment Review and Lessons Learned Discussion, which is corporate for everybody sit down, somebody touched the stove again. And wrong still gets those emails that start with, per my last message, which is basically workplace profanity in business casual language. Today, we're talking about something more dangerous than simply being wrong. Being right for the wrong reasons. Because that's the one that fools people. That's the one that looks fine. That's the one that makes everybody say, well, the outcome was correct. Great, congratulations. You backed into the right answer like a raccoon driving a forklift. And that might feel lucky. It might even feel defensible. But in government contracting, luck is not a control. Accidentally reaching the right conclusion does not prove your system works. It proves your system survived that one decision. So today, we're talking about why randomly right is still wrong.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.
Broadcasting from deep inside the Federal Acquisition Labyrinth, this is the GovCon Show. This show is for acquisition pros, wannabe pros, and procurement insiders who need a place to unpack the chaos. We speak fluent contracting and sarcasm. No clearance required. This is the GovCon Show. And away we go!
Welcome back to the GovCon Show. Whether you're new to the game or you've been doing this for 20 plus years, you already know this isn't just paperwork. And sometimes it's utter chaos. This is where we talk about government contracting honestly and openly, with a little sarcasm and a whole lot of truth, and just enough attitude to keep it real. Today, we're here to talk about one of the most frustrating illusions in procurement and contract administration. You see, the problem is that people get tricked by the idea that a correct outcome automatically assumes the process was sound. It doesn't. And that is where a lot of companies fool themselves, because the result looks right. If the price seemed reasonable, if the audit didn't catch it, then everyone relaxes and says, see, it worked. Our system works fine. And maybe you just got lucky. And that's where the illusion begins. Because when the outcome looks right, companies start giving the process credit that it may not have earned. They assume the result was good, so that the system must be good. No, that is simply lazy thinking. That is how companies mistake success for control. Sometimes the result was good because the systems worked. Sometimes the result was good because one experienced person made the right judgment call. Sometimes Brenda saved everybody again, and sometimes it was good because the compliance gods were apparently in a generous mood and nobody asked the second question. But none of that proves that your system worked. It only proves that one decision landed in the right place, and that is not the same thing. Let's separate two things. These two things get confused all the time, and they're outcome and process. The outcome is what happened. The process is how you got there. Outcome, we selected the right supplier. Process, how did we determine that supplier was the right choice? The price was fair and reasonable. Process, what comparison analysis supports that conclusion? You see, outcomes can be right even when the process is wrong. You can skip steps, you can miss logic, you can fill in the gaps from memory, and you can even get the correct answer. But that does not make it repeatable. And government contracting is not just reward an occasional correct outcome. It demands a system that can produce supportable outcomes consistently. And that's the test, not whether you were right once, but whether your system can be repeatedly right. Here's the part people don't like. Randomly right still means random. The result depends on chance, or personality, or tribal knowledge, or who happened to remember that one clause from 2017 that nobody else knew was still relevant. That is not control. And being right is good. No problem there. Being consistently right is better. Being able to prove why you were right is what actually holds up, because a system is not judged by one lucky decision. It's judged by what it produces time over time. Does similar work get handled the same way? Does similar facts produce the similar outcomes? Can the file explain the decision without the person who made it sitting next to us like we were on a museum tour? That's what matters, because if your system can only announce the outcome but cannot show the logic, then the system is not proving anything. It's just hoping the answer looks good enough. And hope, as we all have discussed before, is not a valid procurement strategy. It is barely a breakfast cereal. Randomly right does not always look dramatic. That is why it's so easy to miss. It shows up in all the normal places. One buyer writes a strong justification because they understand the decision. One team performs an actual price analysis, a real one. Another team writes a nice paragraph explaining why the price felt reasonable. One fixed price proposal tests the scope, travel, material schedule, customer dependencies, and another one says, we know this work. Well, lovely. But knowing the work is not the same as controlling the risk. And that's how randomly right shows up. The company still gets some good outcomes. And that's what makes the problem harder to see. If everything failed, the problem would be obvious. But when things work sometimes, people start believing the system is stronger than it truly is. Random success can look like maturity if nobody examines for patterns. And patterns are where the truth normally lives. Now let's talk about dependencies, because every organization has them. Brenda, Bob, Maria, Greg, the person who knows where everything is, the person who remembers what happened on that contract 5 years ago. They're the person who knows which template not to use, even though it is somehow still named, use this one. And yeah, there is always a Bob. Bob has been here since 1998. Bob has a spreadsheet that runs half of the department. Nobody knows where it came from. Nobody knows how it works. And nobody touches it when Bob is on vacation. That's not a system. That is institutional hostage taking. Now, to be fair, Brenda and Bob may be excellent. They may be the reason the company has survived as long as it has. They may deserve a plaque, a raise, and possibly a quiet room with no Teams notifications. But they are not a control system. They are people. I hope you recognize that underneath my Bob and Brenda joke is the actual risk. If your system only works when the right person is doing the work, it's not really a system. That is not a controlled environment. It's a dependency. Dependencies feel harmless right up until someone asks, what happens if Bob and Brenda is not involved? And if that answer is nervous laughter, then you've learned something very important. Now, let's connect this to the current environment without turning this into another fixed price sermon. Fixed price is not the whole episode, but it is a perfect example. Under fixed price, randomly right gets more expensive. Why? Well, because the contract structure is so much less forgiving. If one team prices travel correctly and another forgets it, that is not a variation. That is a profit risk. If one team documents customer dependencies and another assumes the government will provide what is needed on time, that's not just style difference. That is schedule risk. The most important thing about fixed price contracting is that fixed price rewards consistency. It punishes randomly right because a system that sometimes gets it right may still fail when the cost of getting it wrong lands on the contractor. And that is just the hard truth. If you're relying on luck, memory, or individual heroics, fixed price will eventually find the weak spot, and it will send the bill to your profit line. Oh, it's very efficient. Actually, terrible, but efficient. Now let's think about what happens when someone looks across your complete system, like a reviewer or a new contracts director or a consultant you hired because someone finally said, can we please find out what's actually happening here? They don't just look at one outcome. They look across multiple actions, across buyers and programs, across decisions and approvals. And when they start seeing different logic, different explanations, different treatment of similar facts, the pattern tells a story. Not the policy, not the training deck, but the pattern. One randomly right decision may not scare anyone, but a pattern of inconsistent decisions, even with some good outcomes, tells you your system is not reliably controlled. And that is the problem. A company can be right sometimes and still not be reliable. A company can have good people and still not have a repeatable system. That's why randomly right matters. It looks safe. Several times I've made references to control or controlled system, and I'm sure many of you are wondering what I think controlled looks like. Controlled does not mean perfect. Let's get that out of the way. Perfect is not the standard. And if your compliance strategy depends on everyone being perfect, stop, please stop. That's not a strategy. That's a nervous breakdown with a policy number. Controlled means the system guides the decision. Controlled means the system does not depend entirely on one person's memory, their instincts, or last-minute rescues. It means if Brenda is out, the process still works. If Bob's spreadsheet finally collapses under the weight of its own mystery, the system will still work. If the file gets pulled 6 months later, the story still works. That is control. Not perfection, not 12 more forms, but control. And control is what separates repeatedly right from randomly right. If this discussion is making you wonder whether or not your company is inconsistently right or just occasionally lucky, that's the right question to ask. And no, the answer is not panic. The answer is to look. If your concern is whether or not your policies actually control behavior, run the policy control diagnostic at govconadvisorygroup.com. If your company is dealing with the pressure to accept more fixed price or performance risk work, then run our fixed price conversion risk assessment. And if your company is small or just growing and the system depends too much on one or two people carrying all of the contracting judgment, look at our rent-a-contracting officer approach, because you do not want to find out that your system is randomly right after someone else starts asking all the questions. That is the expensive version. Just go to our website at govconadvisorygroup.com. Use the tools before the system gets tested for you. Okay, so here's the real question. If your company got the right answer today, could it get the same right answer tomorrow with a different person, on a different program, with a different supplier and timeline, maybe even a different reviewer? Would you always get the same answer? Could it show the logic? Could it defend that decision? Could the file stand on its own? And if the answer is yes, great, good. That's what you want. That is a system starting to behave like a system. But if your answer to that question is probably, or it depends, or only if Brenda handles it, then you do not have control. You have a dependency, and dependencies are where risk likes to hide. All right, bringing this episode home. Being wrong is still wrong. Nobody is arguing with that. Being randomly right is also a problem, because a correct outcome does not prove a controlled process. A good result does not prove repeatability. Surviving a firm fixed price contract once does not prove the company understands fixed price risk. That's why randomly right is still wrong, because government contracting is not looking for occasional correctness. It is looking for supportable, repeatable, defensible decisions. The kind a system can produce again and again, not once, not only when Brenda or Bob are available, not when Bob's spreadsheet behaves, but again and again consistently. So stop confusing good outcomes with good systems. Stop confusing luck with control and one right answer with repeatability. Because randomly right might feel fine internally, but under pressure, randomly right starts looking a whole lot like not controlled. Guys, that wraps up this episode. If this episode hit a little close to home, well, great. That probably means it was useful to you. Please like it, share it, and share this episode with somebody in government contracting who thinks fair and reasonable is a complete sentence. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. All right, this is the GovCon Show. And yeah, this one was cleared for public release, but just barely.
If today's episode sounded a little too familiar, that's probably a sign. Until next time, keep your files tight, your logic tighter. Remember, if your compliance approach is built on checking boxes, you're building risk. We'll see you next time on the GovCon Show.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.